More than 80 years ago, on August 20th, 1940, Leon Trotsky, the exiled co-leader of the Russian Revolution and the founder of the Fourth International, was mortally wounded by an agent of the Stalinist GPU at his home in Coyoacan, a suburb of Mexico City. Trotsky died the following day in the early evening hours of August 21st. Trotsky, born in 1879, became a revolutionary at the age of 17. He was chairman of the St. Petersburg Soviet during the 1905 Russian Revolution. He was co-leader with Vladimir Lenin of the October Revolution of 1917. He was Soviet Russia's first Commissar of Foreign Affairs, and he was the founder and leader of the Red Army during the Civil War to defend the newly formed workers' state. Beginning in 1923, Trotsky led the left opposition, that is, the Marxist and internationalist opposition to the nationalist and bureaucratic degeneration of the Soviet Union, personified by Stalin. The repudiation of socialist internationalism by the Stalinist bureaucracy required a campaign of historical falsification. This campaign was aimed at obliterating Trotsky's political influence and denying the connection between the perspective for which he fought and that which guided the Russian Revolution itself. Trotsky was expelled from the Russian Communist Party in November of 1927. He was exiled to the steppes of Central Asia and Alma-Ata, then part of the Soviet Union, in January of 1928. He was expelled from the Soviet Union to Turkey in 1929. He was forced to flee from Turkey to France in 1933. And from France, he was forced to flee to Norway in 1935. And then finally, in January of 1937, to Mexico, the only country in the world that would grant him a visa. There he took up residence in Coyoacan, a suburb of Mexico City. Even in exile, and despite the unimaginable personal and political hardships, Trotsky waged a fearless campaign to expose the crimes of Stalinism and its disastrous consequences for the international working class. His writings from this period, including his analysis of the rise of fascism in Germany and his exposure of the consequences of Stalinist Popular Front policies in France and Spain, are invaluable guides even 85 years later. Among his greatest works is The Revolution Betrayed, written in 1936, which remains the definitive analysis of the social and political origins of Stalinism. In 1938, Trotsky and his co-thinkers founded the Fourth International, the World Party of Socialist Revolution, as the political embodiment of the irreconcilable antagonism between the Stalinist apparatus on the one hand and the Soviet and the international working class on the other. Terrified by the threat that Trotsky and the Fourth International represented, Stalin resorted to ever more brutal violence and repression. Within the Soviet Union, a campaign of political genocide was carried out between 1936 and 1939 against workers and intellectuals trained in the Marxist tradition, including all of Lenin's and Trotsky's closest collaborators. Hundreds of thousands of socialists, the product of an immense tradition of revolutionary culture in Russia, were massacred. The grotesque lie that the actions of the Stalinist bureaucracy were carried out in the interests of socialism had enormous consequences on the class consciousness of millions of workers throughout the world. The Stalinist GPU, the state secret police, worked systematically to physically liquidate Trotsky's closest supporters and co-thinkers. Among those murdered by Stalinist agents were Erwin Wolf, one of Trotsky's political secretaries in July of 1937, Ignaz Reis, who had defected from the GPU and declared his support for Trotsky in 1937, September of 1937, Trotsky's son and close collaborator Lev Sedov in February 1938, and Rudolf Clement, secretary of the Fourth International, who was kidnapped and murdered in July of 1938 on the very eve of the founding conference. His dismembered body was discovered in the River Seine in Paris. Trotsky wrote in 1938, after the assassination of Clement, now, quote, imperialism no longer has to depend on a happy accident. In the Stalinist mafia, it has a ready-made agency for the systematic murder of revolutionists. The terrible culmination of the bloody campaign to destroy Marxist opposition to the Stalinist bureaucracy came on August 20th, 1940, when an ice pick was driven into the head of Leon Trotsky. The hand that brought an end to the life of the greatest living strategist of world revolution was that of Ramon Mercader, aka Frank Jackson, aka Jacques Monard, an agent of the GPU. Despite the lying denials of the Soviet Stalinist regime, it was immediately assumed throughout the world that the assassin was a Stalinist agent. But for 35 years, little was known about the vast scale of the conspiracy and the network of agents utilized to carry it out. How was the GPU able to infiltrate the Trotskyist movement and assassinate its leader in a fortified villa in Coyoacán? In 1975, 35 years after Trotsky's assassination, the International Committee of the Fourth International launched the first systematic investigation into the assassination of Trotsky under the headline, Security of the Fourth International. The Security of the Fourth International investigation produced a series of revelations proving that the assassination of Trotsky and his supporters was orchestrated through a global network of spies and assassins who infiltrated the Trotskyist movement. These included Marx Borovsky, who was the secretary of Trotsky's son, Lev Sedov, and who was central in the murder of Erwin Wolf, Ignaz Reiss, Rudolf Clement, and Sedov himself. Joseph Hansen, who was a personal secretary to Trotsky in Mexico, a guard at the time of his assassination, and would go on to become the principal political leader of the Socialist Workers' Party. And Sylvia Ageloff, secretary for US Trotskyist leader James Cannon, working in the SWP Center in New York City. One unanswered question, however, in the investigation was the precise role of another Sylvia Ageloff, the personal companion of Ramon Mercader. She met Mercader in July of 1938 on the eve of the founding conference of the Fourth International. In the 2 years between that meeting and Trotsky's assassination, Ageloff was involved in every critical step by which Mercader was introduced to the Trotskyist movement, up to the point of infiltrating the house in Coyoacán and carrying out his bloody act. The role of Sylvia Ageloff is the subject of a new essay published on the World Socialist website by Eric London, Sylvia Ageloff and the Assassination of Leon Trotsky. The essay is the subject of today's meeting.